Hey everyone, this is Jake, aka Lunar Wolf, and today we're going to be reviewing Amazon's new open world MMO called New World. This game takes place in 16th, 17th century progression over to the New World that is America, but instead of actually making it to America, your ship falls into this weird anomaly in the Atlantic Ocean that draws you into a magical island that is absolutely massive, but filled with a number of different creatures and undead and corruption that turns humans into these undead roving creatures. Before I get too deep into this, I want to give you a bit of a background on my setup here so you can understand the performance metrics that I may talk about. This game is incredibly demanding, at least at this point in time, on the very high setting or even the high setting. I'm running currently an i7 9700K overclocked to 5 GHz, a 2080 Super, and 32 gigs of 3200 megahertz RAM. A pretty high-end setup, and I was still chugging along on these high and very high settings at about 70 to 80 frames per second in the open world, and jumping into towns where it's a lot less optimized, where there are larger numbers of players, my frame rate dropped to between 30 and 40 FPS, and it actually was a very difficult type of game to stream on Twitch because of the frame rate drop for the rate that I was streaming at. Let's jump into the character creation. For the character creation, you don't have a lot of options. There's very little that you can do. You can only choose your gender, you can only choose a face, a skin tone, a hairstyle, facial hair, and the colors of both hair and facial hair. There's no changing of facial features, there's no customization of the actual body of the character. You're stuck with what you get, at least for right now. Do remember that this is a preview. I would even consider it pre-beta, kind of post-alpha pre-beta preview. Once character creation has been completed, you then jump into a pretty good tutorial, I would have to say. It's very visually intriguing, and it allows you to understand the basic mechanics of combat. Combat in this game is a very mixed bag, if you will. I personally enjoy it. Others will call it slow and clunky. I call it strategic. It reminds me more of Dark Souls 1 style combat, where every hit count, at least at the earlier levels, before you have access to magic weapons. The tutorial is good for an action MMO. It teaches you the basic mechanics of drawing your weapon, stowing your weapon, dodging, blocking, heavy attack, light attack, and then you get into the weapon skills themselves. Now, what's different about this game than other MMOs, say an action MMO like Elder Scrolls Online, is you only have weapon skills. You have at least 2 different paths. I don't know if they're going to add more paths and more skills as the game progresses and they get closer and closer to release, but right now every weapon only has about 2 paths and 3 skills in each path. You do get 20 points. You can level your weapon 20 times to put into active and passive skills, so you can really have a good customizability. But early on, the skills are fairly straightforward. They're decent attack skills with decent damage, but incredibly long cooldowns. I believe they should shrink the cooldowns on these a bit, as it would make combat a little bit more fast-paced. I don't know if that was a balanced decision for PvP or what. Aside from that, I actually greatly enjoyed the combat here because it was a nostalgic style combat. It felt strategic. I had to have the right timing on when I dodged to move away from an enemy attack. There's no stamina drain on attacks, there's only stamina drain on dodges, but every enemy can and will kill you. And you will die a lot early on if you don't have a good grasp of the combat. It's not necessarily forgiving, but as time progresses, instead of the game getting harder, it gets a little bit easier with the better and better gear you have. I personally would have liked to see the same level of difficulty all the way from beginning to endgame, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's talk about story. I honestly don't have any real idea of the story overall. I didn't feel like spending my time reading through the pages that you find in the open world and reading through the quest descriptions and what lore is behind these quests, because I honestly wanted to experience the main mechanics of the game. So there may be deeper lore than what I'm saying here, but there's not really a guidance and story and cutscenes aside from the very beginning and some little snippets here and there when you come into special types of combat encounters. So it didn't feel very fleshed out when it comes to that aspect. And the main story quest, if you can even call it a quest line, is the same types of quests that lead you to 3 or 4 different towns. Go out, gather, kill enemies, come back. And they're not close by. They're usually about 1 to 2, maybe even 3 kilometers away from where you have to turn in the quest point, and there are no mounts in this game, so you really do have to just run there and run back. After about level 20ish or so, the main quest line just entirely drops off, and you have to focus on doing quests for the faction that you join, which I'll get into later, or the town that you're in. And I'll be honest, a lot of the quests are the same style of content, which to me is very boring. It almost feels like they just slapped on the PvE aspect to a game where they deemed was going to be an open world PvP style MMO because of the faction system. I'll discuss that towards the end of the video when I give my full thoughts on everything and my recommendations. But this is just kind of an early on precursor or foreshadowing for exactly what you can expect coming forward, at least right now. Again, I'm going to constantly remind you throughout this video that this is a pre-beta game. There is a lot left to do. It looks great, but there is quite a bit left to do in this game. Optimization, fixes, balancing, you name it. But for what it is, I did enjoy it. Now, straying away from quests, I decided to just go around and try out the different mechanics like your typical MMO style things. So you have all of the stuff that makes it feel like an MMO. You have your attribute points that you can adjust and solidify your build for the weapon that you choose, or weapons as you progress through levels. Around level 15, I believe, you gain a second weapon slot, and then at level 30, you gain your third weapon slot. So you have 3 options of skills to be able to pop between. The downside is that the skills all share the same cooldown for whatever button it is. I do believe and hope that they will change that. I can understand why it's on there, especially when this game was a lot more PvP oriented earlier on. But it does get pretty aggravating, and it slows the combat down quite a bit. Another aspect that makes the game feel slow is traveling. Fast traveling costs a rare item called Azoth, and you only get Azoth from chests, maybe high-level enemies, or through completing quests. And the further you are away from a town that you visited, you can only fast travel to a town that you visited. The further away you are from that town, the more it will cost. One caveat is that certain types of quests that you contain in your quest log, you can't complete them if you fast travel. It will actually abandon those quests, and it will give you a warning if you do so. The world is very, very large. I had a delivery quest that took me from one of the starting areas to a much higher level area. I was running for 5 kilometers. I was just auto-running, moving my mouse every so often, watching a YouTube video, listening to music, talking to my friends in Discord. It took a lot away from the game. It didn't make me want to explore because of how far away the area is, and if I was flagged for PvP, I definitely did not want to explore because I did not want that quest resetting. It really felt tedious doing these types of quests, so after a few of them, and to be honest, after an exploit was patched that allowed you to contain a ton of these quests and knock them out super quickly and gain a lot of levels very quickly, it just wasn't, at least to me, worthwhile. There is a lot to the open world. It feels both very populated and empty at the same time. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of open space where there aren't enemies, and it takes a long time to run into another player if you're going into a very less populated area. When you do come across another player, it's kind of nice. It makes it feel like you are out in the wilderness and you're just crossing paths with somebody who's traveling to a different area. You can see some enemies here and there, so you can go in and attack them, or you can run away. In terms of gathering, almost everything in the game is gatherable. At least every tree that I could see is one that you could gather. Almost every rock or boulder you could mine. Almost every piece of flora on the ground you could harvest. And of course, every type of wild animal you could skin. So there's a lot to be said in that sense, that you can gather everything as you're running along, so you can kind of kill two birds with one stone. But the time it takes to gather certain items just adds to that tedious feel to it. I mean, look at this clip here of me chopping down a tree. It literally takes me 2 minutes to chop down a single tree. It's crazy. I can understand the amount of stuff that you get from it, but my God, it's so long to do some of these gathers, and God forbid you get hit by an enemy, it resets it. So you have to start that gather all over again. You don't get it over time. You only get all the items once you've finished gathering that node. But you need to gather quite a bit because you get special perks as you level up your gathering skills. And that's one aspect of the overall crafting system. The gathering side of things is that as you progress these levels here and get higher and higher, you get certain perks where you can track certain types of animals, or you can gather new higher level items to be able to create higher level weapons and armor and jewelry later on. Moving on to the crafting section of it, there's two subsets for crafting. There is refining and the actual crafting. You have your typical setup of the different types of items that you can craft, and each of them having their own type of profession, if you will. You don't have to necessarily focus on just one or the other, but they are pretty time consuming and they are pretty resource heavy. So unless you play this game for many, many hours a day, many days a week, it's not really realistic that you would quickly get to level 300 in every single profession. So it is somewhat tedious, but it's a very good system, I think, and it adds some weight to the crafted items there themselves. When jumping into crafting, and you have to kind of really consider the player economy. As far as I learned, there's no trading between players in this game, and there's no NPC merchant, at least right now, to sell your junk to. You have to either sell it on the auction house, or you salvage it and take repair items and some materials. The player economy in terms of the actual market itself was all over the place. Didn't seem to be any types of limits to cost. You could put whatever you wanted up for whatever price, and if there wasn't one there in that specific town, then you could jack up the price and have it as high as you wanted. Most people didn't because it's a preview, but it can be potentially dangerous if there's no suggested price or general set price on these things and actually setting a value for certain types of items. One thing to note that I actually did really like is that the auction house was specifically town-centric. If I was in a different town or outpost, I could not access the same items on the auction house that I could find in the different area. So you really do have to spread that out. And speaking of that, your storage is also town-centric. So you can set yourself at your inn as your recall place, and that's the town that you station yourself out of, and you focus on putting the majority of items in your storage there. But there's storage in other towns, and you might be passing through and you need to dump a lot of stuff so you can continue on your long delivery quest. Those items will stay in that town, and they will only be accessible for crafting in that town. Now that we've discussed a lot of the basics here that are traditional in MMOs, let's start focusing on the PvP aspect. Now, this game, initially in the alpha, was very PvP-centric. There were a lot of mechanics that players actually did not like. When you died, you would drop items, and those items would actually be taken from your inventory by the person that killed you and looted your body. So they removed that from this portion of PvP, but with removing that and not replacing with anything different, they kind of removed all risk and reward for PvP and turned it more or less into just kind of bragging rights. The open world PvP is faction-based, and you can only flag or unflag yourself when you are inside a sanctuary, which is a town or an outpost. Once there, you flag yourself for PvP and you move on. If you're doing group PvP and you're with another person in your actual party, you both have to be flagged or unflagged before you can leave town. Moving out to the open world, there was a lot to be had with PvP. Is the combat kind of fun? Yeah, it's interesting. It's a lot more fun when there's just a big group of people just going at it and it's pure chaos, and that was actually incredibly enjoyable. Moving forward here, if you get onto the 1v1s, it is skill-based. Not weapon skill-based, I mean actual skill-based of when you do certain abilities or how you dodge something, which made it fun, but the issues that I had with PvP is when you died, the only risk that happened was you just reset your PvP quests that you might have been on for your faction, which is kind of a bummer because some of them you spend a good 20 minutes getting to that point and it resets you all the way back to square one. The other aspect is that any player can revive you when you die, and when you die, you become unflagged for PvP, so any player, flagged or not, can revive you. Here's the problem though, is when you would revive, you would then be flagged for PvP again, so your enemy could kill you, revive you, kill you again, and consistently do this just to troll you or grief you. Again, they're not gaining anything, and you're not losing anything, so it just becomes annoying. Another aspect to this was that because of a few power leveling exploits, players would flag themselves for PvP and go hang outside the sanctuaries of very low level areas and just gank people. So they need to add some form of mechanic that your location is shown on map if you kill too many lobies, or you get some type of debuff, or honestly, allow them to not be attackable if you are 10, 15, 20 levels above them. These are just suggestions that I have, but I'm sure they'll figure out a better way to do this closer to release. If not, they're going to have a massive problem on their hands. Checking over into factions now, in all honesty, there really isn't a point to it. I mean, you have your quests. They all have very similar types of armor and quest progression that you can get. The quests are very lacking. Again, they are just gather quests. I mean, you'll see in the gameplay video here how tedious some of these quests are. I've sped the footage up so you can just run through and see how long it actually takes to do these types of things. The experience is kind of worth it. I mean, it is the fastest way to level is doing these types of PvP quests because they do have the highest reward. Just getting out into the open world and killing other players, that was fun, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of risk or reward. At some point, it honestly feels like they slapped PvE onto the PvP game that they had, removed what gave the PvP its bite as a hardcore PvP game, and put some semblance of some PvE in there, so it kind of appealed to both aspects, but it fell flat a little bit. One thing that I did not actually get a chance to do, because my schedule did not allow me during these 10 days that the preview was around, was participate in a war. You need to be level 50 at least to participate in this war, which are like these castle sieges. So I can't really comment on whether or not those were good. I'm sure there's a number of videos out there that you guys can check out, but I wish I would have gotten the chance to try that out. But nonetheless, that's kind of the PvP aspect to this game. It's still very lacking. A lot of potential, a lot of promise, but it needs work. Moving on to Endgame, I saw bits and pieces of Endgame. That white area on the map towards the top there, the north section there, is very Endgame area. It's level 45 plus in certain areas, level 60, 65 plus on these portals and whatnot, which, by the way, portals are a very fun type of public event here. They pop up, you get a couple of people together, you go kill a bunch of enemies, you get some loot. There's a mechanic for each different type of portal there, where it's a large or a small one, where you have to break something or attack a certain type of thing or kill a number of enemies before you expel the corruption. But it's fun. It gets pretty intense, especially if you have very few people and are trying to solo it. It does get very difficult, and it was exciting and fun. The rewards, however, were not that great. You only get a box with some items there. I actually was just getting better loot from generally killing high-level areas in the Scorpius section there when I was power leveling with a zerg of enemies. But talking more on Endgame, I didn't get to max level. I got to about 36 or so, which the game does kind of open up there, and that's the first really big hurdle into starting to get really good gear. But another streamer had made it, I think he glitched his way through some walls, or they just ran through an area, them in a big group, around level 45 into a 65 plus area, where they ran through and made it to the final boss. As you can see here in just a brief clip, it actually did look pretty interesting and enjoyable. I'm sure I would have had fun had I made it to it, but I didn't quite get there. Check out Asmon Gold's video on the endgame there. I'll link his video in the description. I think it's well worth it to see some raw gameplay of the end game at this early stage. Now that we've gone over the majority of the mechanics here, I've mentioned a few things. I may have forgotten something here and there. There's a lot of other nice mechanics too, like different areas you have influence increases, so you can go in and do a lot of quests or kill a bunch of enemies and level up your influence for that area, and you get perks like increased experience, increased standing gain, stuff about player housing there, gather speed increase, storage space. Overall, the user interface felt pretty solid. I played it on an ultra wide, as you can tell by the aspect ratio of the video that you're looking at, and it scaled very well with that. Nothing felt too far off to either side, but nothing felt like it was completely clustered right in the center. I wish there is some form of mini-map that comes with later iterations. The map itself is so large, and as you're running and moving there's no way to just like track yourself on there and have it move with the map so you can see where you're going. Now, let's talk about the visuals of this game and the world in general. This game is absolutely beautiful. Huge sweeping landscapes. The backdrop is just stunning every single time that I look around me as I'm running and jumping from town to town. Each area feels different. There's more tropical style areas, more jungly and wooded areas. Then there's more kind of barren areas, dead areas, marshy areas, swampy areas, snowy areas. They really do have a number of different types of biomes here, and they pull it off very well. The weather feels realistic. I mean, fog will roll in and it makes it incredibly difficult to see, and the light rays from the sun shine through like they would realistically. If they can optimize a lot of the performance aspects, I think a lot more people will be able to experience the absolute beauty of this game without having to spend a ton of money on their PC setup. Or with Nvidia's launch of the 3000 series cards, a lot more people are going to be able to access the beauty of this game, and it's phenomenal. I am honestly blown away by it. I've played a lot of beautiful games, and this feels like a AAA single player style of graphical engine. It's amazing. I've never seen an MMO really look this beautiful. The monster types are somewhat repetitive, which I wish was different, that they had more uniqueness to them, but it does lose its luster over time. There's a good number of enemy types, at least for right now at this stage in the game. So as we near towards the end of this video here, it's quite a long one. I'm sorry for that, but there's a lot to be said about this game, and I really wanted to give it a good review. I have hours upon hours of footage that I captured over these 10 days that I either sped up or couldn't fit in this video here. What I disliked about the game is a lack of risk and reward in PvP. I dislike a lot of the bugs and exploits with the PvP style. I can see a lot of griefing happening. I dislike the content of the quests. I wish there was more variety in these quests, both PvE and PvP, and both faction and storyline. I wish there was more lore that was more readily available. I disliked the travel mechanics there. This world is great, but I wish there was a mount of some sort there, or some auto-pathing when you're on the road. I wish there was some limitation on the endgame aspect, where a certain number of people can just go and zerg an endgame area, and when they're 10, 15, 20 levels below it, survive, kill these bosses, gain some good loot for when they hit the right level, and just power level their way through. I do think that needs to be scaled back. All in all, there's a lot of stuff that really needs to be fleshed out. One of my biggest gripes is the optimization. This is an Amazon game, and Amazon owns Twitch, the largest streaming platform in the world, with some of the largest streamers in the world. I mean, look at Asmongold. Roughly around 50,000 people per stream. Playing a game like this, I looked at his stream, even he was chugging along at certain points. It's just the optimization. When you have a lot of people around you, the frame rate drops drastically. So there definitely needs to be some type of performance optimization here and there. I can see a problem with server density too. I mean, as the game was early on and it was very popular, with people, the beginning of this preview, there was 30 to 40 minute wait times. Now moving on to what I enjoyed. I thoroughly enjoyed the style of combat. I'm always a fan of action MMOs. There's no tab targeting here, so you have to aim with the magic, you have to aim with the bows, you have to aim with the guns, and you have to aim with your melee. Nothing just locks on, so it is more difficult, it is more strategic, and it makes it more fun. I absolutely loved the visuals, the art style, the general world on there. I can see myself expending a lot of time in here. I actually enjoyed the crafting setup too, because it felt very intuitive, but it felt like you should invest in there and you get some good value out of it. I wish I could have experienced more of the end game, but who knows what they're going to add in for the end game. I don't think they necessarily intended anyone to get there during this preview. My overall thoughts are that this is an early build of the game. They're going to be fleshing out a lot more, that they're going to have different types of quests, different types of enemies, revamp certain things here, add more to PvP, add more to PvE, add more to endgame. I still had a blast playing it. Even when I was done gathering the content for making this review video, I had some fun. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm glad this game did not release this month like it was supposed to. I'm glad it got pushed back so they can take the time and take the feedback to work on a very good game. Do I think it's the next WoW killer? No. Do I even think a game like Ashes of Creation, a very ambitious one, will be the next WoW killer? No, I don't think anything will be like that. Do I want this to be a very good MMO that I can spend a lot of time in and make it a main gameplay that I log into nearly every day? Yes, I do want that. I think there's a lot of potential, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but I had the blast playing it, so I would definitely recommend at least signing up for the beta if you guys want to try it out yourself. You don't have to pre-order it. That just kind of guarantees you the slot into the closed beta. Maybe wait and see how much the game progresses before you drop any money on it. But again, I had fun, so I would definitely recommend it, and I still remain hopeful that they will fix a lot of the issues and add more to the game as time goes on. Well, that wraps up our review video here for Amazon's New World MMO. Please like it if you enjoyed the content, subscribe if you wish, and I'll see you in the next one.